non-existent, and they can't imagine life any other way.
Correct.
So they create what they imagine.
Well, here's something that's just staggering. The Queen of England claims that she owns 1/6 of all the landmass and everything on it on the planet.
Huh.
Now, that's an awful big claim for such a short, poorly dressed woman.
Yeah.
So, but basically it's that, the divine right of rulers and all of that kind of stuff is taking yet another big hit over the course of summer and as we go into the revolution. The revolution stuff that we see eventually does, in late October, shift from being any kind of a local political phenomenon to much more of a greater planetary phenomenon.
Right. And that's what this is about. It's not just about the United States. It's about all of it.
Yeah, it will be actually rather late to the party, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so you have some conclusions here, and then as you're going through your conclusions, a question that has been asked is what people can expect, like, over the next 18 months, maybe some key dates, key events. It says spoilers of all kinds. So as you wrap up the Alta Report number 6 for the 1309 series, if maybe you can keep in a step further and just, like, over the next 18 months, some highlights.
Sure, we can do it in sort of large jumps or steps here.
Cool.
There's going to be a shift in emotional ability to prop up the idea that happiness is just around the corner, beginning in May 14th. It'll take another the confidence factor will take another big hit between July 15th and August 15th. That'll be especially true relative to the dollar and derivatives and all of that mess. We have some indications that around the equinox, which is to say the autumnal equinox in September, that we're going to see the denouement of this business about the press. In other words, there may be some relatively dramatic events around then about the press and their lying, and someone fesses up, something along those lines. And then again, we see a buildup around a trigger event on October 26th that takes 10 and a half days actually to build up, and then there's the release component of it beginning on November 5th. And from November 5th onward, the Obama administration is going to be irritable. They'll be like a dog that somebody's been poking in the ribs with a stick. He's going to be ready to bite at anything. And the problem is going to be duality expressing both in the military and geopolitical realm as well as the dollar issue. And there's going to be pressures from all sides, and at that point we may actually end up with a 5-theater war. And the 5 theaters would include Iraq and Afghanistan, which we have going now,
right.
Spread over to Pakistan and include the Israeli attack on Iran, and then simultaneously a response against Israel at the same time that North Korea goes a little crazy. And at that point, our military gets really spread around the planet, and at the same time that we see a huge move relative to the dollar. And that covers all of November, December, January, and February of 2010. And simultaneous with that, beginning in this summer, are the international riots against starvation and the way that things are organized, where the bankers own it all, etc. That continues in its own thread that leads to the active revolution stage just as the military starts going crazy in November. And then that thread goes all the way through into about end of October 2010.
Yeah. Wow. Crazy.
It's not good.
No.
I mean, I look at it this way. There's 3 possibilities, and they're all of them are relatively stark. But the 3 possibilities are that I'm an absolute nut job, and all this is just totally meaningless, and none of it will occur.
Right.
Okay. Given our past history, that may not be the case.
Right.
Okay. So that's possibility number 1. I'm absolutely nutters. Possibility is number 2 is that I'm absolutely nutters, and it doesn't matter because I'm accurate, and we'll have something like this war show up because of the linguistics. Then there is this 3rd possibility, and this goes again to the idea of the linguistics. Bear in mind, we don't get descriptions of the events. We really get a shading, a shadow of the words that will be used after the event has hit the mass consciousness. So maybe the war information stuff we're seeing in October and November could be expressed in any of these three different ways. The first way is, oh, giant headlines, Clif High is a nutter, war didn't happen, ha ha ha, somebody go poke him with a stick and wake him up. The second one could be that the headlines read, giant war, lots of people dead. The third one could be that, everybody listened to me, and we all got together and declared that this was not to happen, and it didn't happen, and therefore the third possibility could be giant headlines, hey, we did it, we averted war. Basically, the linguistic sets would be all the same. They would all discuss war in the same kind of terms. We would just have a different flavor on the three of them. And so I would hope for it to be one or three, but I'm afraid it's going to be two.
Well, let's all work for two, or three, rather. Let's all work for three.
Well, I don't care if it's one. If everybody says, hey, you're a nutter and so on, that's fine. My ambition has always been to be a boat bum anyway, so I'll quite happily take my sailboat out and just putter around.
There you go. Wouldn't that be delightful?
Yes.
All right, so here's the thing, because you brought it up, and I'm going to ask you the question now. This is from somebody that wrote in earlier today, and they said, October 26th event plus lag time until reaction / manifestation early November. Well, on Sunday, November 11th, we enter the sixth night of the Mayan calendar.
Oh, yeah, that's right. I forget about that, yeah.
Okay. And what significance does that have for you?
Well, the night on the calendars are usually the point at which we discard those things that don't work and we get into the grumbles, if you will. So the fact that it's coincident with an area that we've already identified really tends to sort of make sense. I've always maintained that astrology is accurate. I've never had the opportunity to study it. It's something you really have to get into when you're young and devote time to, and it sort of missed me in that regard. But I kind of wish I had studied it because it would give backing to a lot of the dates that we've got here.
Okay. Here's another question. Will the monetary collapses coincide with the new energy releases, e.g. 0 point? And if so, is there anything really to worry about?
Sure. There's tons of stuff to worry about in my estimation. And no, as far as we've been able to determine, the new electrics don't show up until about 2015.
Ah, okay.
So there's going to be, perhaps an 8-year lag time because the dollar will go at the end of 2009.
Okay. And I'm not real comfortable with the term worry.
Right.
It doesn't change anything.
Sure. No, it's how do they phrase that? That's a payment on a debt not yet taken.
Right. Exactly. Okay, so here's another question. When will we in the U.S. see the real UFOs, as in lots of them all over the country?
That's a little problematic because of our military. We'll be one of the very last countries that'll actually occur in because our guys have a tendency to shoot them down. They don't want those exposures here in the U.S. because you have to understand this. At the core of the whole idea of interdimensional or UFO travel, which is basically interdimensional, we have at that core hyperdimensional physics. That is also at the core of 0 point energy. It's also at the core of enlightenment, spirituality, etc. And it's all tied together. And the powers that be don't want that spread within their empire. And by that I mean the Anglo-American empire that's ruled by the central banks. There's 3 countries or 4 countries on the planet that don't have a central bank. And typically, they're the ones we label the axis of evil. Now, some of them are stupid, like North Korea, and they are indeed evil just because of that stupidity. But others, like Iran, they've seen the horrors of a central bank, and they just don't want one. That's why we're trying to have everybody beat them up. Who's the head of all of the central banks? Well, okay, you could say that they're Jewish, but I prefer to think of it as them being Zionists, which ties them back to Israel and so on. So there's plenty of stuff to take us down a rather non-productive few years here.
Right. Okay. Somebody wants to know about some updates, whistleblowers with the alien trans-dimensional devices, if there's any new information on that, and also about the scarred woman, if that showed up. I didn't see that in there, but I might have missed it in the number 6.
Yeah, we throw in personalities like this, and it's a woman who wears scars, okay? Now, so I could be misinterpreting that. It may be that she doesn't have scars on her physical body, but maybe she does and she wears veils. Or this is just how the language comes on out, and so until she actually shows up, we're going to be uncertain. There's just this another female personality popping up that will be a good temporal marker through this period of time. The last time we had these sorts of sets, they started describing a woman who had connections between Europe and Central America, et cetera, and it turned out to be, what's her name, that was released by the rebels in Colombia, that had dual citizenship between Colombia and France. I can't, her name escapes me at the moment. And she went back on home in France, and she met our linguistics by coming out and saying, you know, she was held for 6 years as a hostage, and yet she comes back and says, we can't hate these people. We have to understand what's going on and react in an entirely different way. And so she met our criteria there. The scarred woman, or the woman who wears scars, is another temporal marker. When the personalities show up like this, we insert them in the reports, because if they show up, then those things that are temporally associated with them are just around the corner. And so the appearance of that woman later on will be associated with, then basically, when you see a woman, a female personality that appears in the global media stream, it may be alternative media and then gain mass attention, but it might even be mainstream. But when you see this personality appear, then you'll know we're within, say, a month or so of the whole outbreak of the revolution going active, et cetera, and the big shift in the populace, where maybe 7 or 10 or 12 or 15 or 20% of the populace will get it, and they'll say, no, we don't need to reform our government, we need to do away with it and get at these powers that be guys, and then start having technical solutions, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. Good idea. Good idea.
But basically, she's a temporal marker. The
yes.
device stuff, we're starting, as you noted in our conversation earlier, we're starting to see it start to hit the mainstream.
Yes, it is. And, you know, like I said, there's a lot of places where they're dumping information, and it's just little spurts here and there. And if you're paying attention, you can see how it all correlates, and even in with your reports. So It's been pretty interesting. It really has. We have another question for you. If you've ever seen the movie Knowing or The Day the Earth Stood Still, and what are your thoughts about either one of these flicks?
Well, I love the Day the Earth Stood Still, the original. I don't go to theaters or any of that kind of stuff because of issues with key energy.
Right.
I don't handle crowds well.
Right.
So if it doesn't come out on video, and even then I may not see it for years because it's just my eclectic interest. I am interested in this Knowing movie, and I'd like to see what that's all about.
Yeah, but, me too. That one was the one that piqued my interest as well.
Yeah, but beyond that, no, I'm sorry. I don't usually just watch those things.
Okay. And how, this is another one, how we might be involved in 5 wars if our military bases have to be dismantled.
Well, they're not simultaneous. One leads into the other. We get into a 5-theater situation. Our logistics are spread terribly thin, and all of a sudden we can't even pay for stuff because other countries are no longer accepting our green pieces of paper or otherwise a transferred electronic debt in lieu of goods, and so we have to start evacuating people. The military, for instance, may have to withdraw and abandon bases in Greenland and Finland and so on so that they can use the oil and diesel that keeps those guys going in other parts of their operation. Make sense?
It certainly does.
Okay, so one will trigger the other, and they will on-go from that period. But it'll be when resources become very desperate that they'll start thinking about shutting down a lot of these bases that, basically are just there to intimidate the locals.
Sounds right. Sounds right. And it does. It absolutely sounds right. Now, we're going to get into something, let's see, how much time before we have a break? How many minutes? We got 5 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about, and thank you, my engineer, thank you very much for your prompts over there. I appreciate it. The obvious big thing that's just hit today was the pandemic.